after a car accident. My head was banged up. I thought I was the secret lover of a charming CEO. I imagined myself as a beloved substitute canary in a twisted relationship with a powerful figure, or the young wife forced into love by a mobster, running away with his child. But the reality is, I've been a pampered heiress, who has never faced hardship in my life. After experiencing all this, I found it quite thrilling. My husband Mavis Andrew pleaded, "Please, darling, stop playing around. I feel like you're going to wear me out." After some tender moments with Mavis Andrew into the late hours, I dragged my tired body to get dressed. Hearing a noise, he opened his eyes, bare-chested. He lay on his arms watching me, red marks from my grip still visible on his back. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" His voice was husky and sexy, seductively alluring. I paused for a moment, then dress faster. "I know your rules. Lovers can't stay the night." "Mavis Andrew, where on earth do you think you're going at this hour?" I couldn't be bothered to respond. This charming playboy was acting innocent with me, as if I were some NAVE girl. "Of course I'm going home, even if it's just a little dump." I hadn't even finished saying, "rental apartment," when he yanked me back onto the bed with a kiss. The sudden kiss hit me like a storm, leaving me gasping for air. In a daze, I heard him mutter, "Want to run away from home again? Guess you're not tired yet. Let's continue." I pushed against him, but he was too strong, making me feel like I was reluctant yet receptive. "Forget it, I'm his secret lover. Isn't that what I'm here for? As long as he can give me money to save my brother in the ICU." I closed my eyes in humiliation. I must admit, the guy's skills were quite impressive. "Didn't sleep well last night? Why not catch a few more Z's?" Mavis Andrew adjusted his tie, and leaned down to kiss my forehead as I sat up in bed. I pushed him away, unwilling for more. "I have work today. Let me drive you." "No need. I don't want anyone to see us together. It could get complicated." He pinched my cheek. "Honey, you seem a bit odd. Does he call every woman in such an intimate manner?" Suppressing the bitterness within, I curled my lips in a cold smirk. "Hey, Mavis Andrew, just make sure the money's there." Mavis Andrew paused. "So you want me to give you money?" I was stunned. "Do you think I want it for free? My dear wife, can we be a bit reasonable? My card is with you." He pulled a lavish leather wallet from his suit pocket. I opened it to find only $5. Is he really showing me an empty wallet just so he doesn't have to pay? I eyed him skeptically. He glanced at his watch, kissed me one last time, and hurried out. "Wife, I have a meeting. I'll be off." I sighed, relieved at least I still had my job to earn some money. An hour later, I arrived at the Andrew Group. I didn't have my badge, but no one stopped me. Once on the top floor, I found the secretarial area but didn't see my own desk. "Excuse me, where is my workstation?" I timidly asked, and everyone just stared at me in surprise. Quickly, a capable gentleman stood up, looking unusually respectful. "Which desk would you like? The one closest to the CEO's office allows you to monitor him directly." Me. Why on earth would I monitor the CEO? Looking at the NAMA tag that said, "CEO's assistant," on the man's chest, I felt there was more to this than met the eye. Maybe it was Mavis Andrew, who set this all up. Being near him would make it easy for him to do whatever he wanted. Such a cunning, flirtatious man. I sat at the assistant's desk, logged onto the computer, but nobody assigned me any tasks. Instinctively, I opened the stock market to check the trends. It wasn't until Mavis Andrew wrapped up his meeting and exited in a huddle with people that I realized half the morning had gone by. Dressed in a high-end Italian suit paired with a simple white shirt, he exuded an air of elegant nonchalance that belied the wildness of the previous night. He didn't notice me until he settled in his office and glanced at his phone, then abruptly looked up at me. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, and his brightened, forming a "come here" shape with his lips. Furrowing my brows, I reluctantly stood up. Once inside, I locked the door and closed the curtains. I started to unbutton my shirt with a cold expression. Mavis Andrew's eyes widened in disbelief. "Darling, you..." He froze, his ears flushed a deep red. "I thought that's what you wanted?" I asked, slightly confused. He fidgeted, his voice a bit hoarse. "Really, is that okay?" I winked at him. He immediately came over like a well-trained puppy. In the next moment, I produced a pause terminal from behind, and pressed it against him, before he could get any closer. Good thing I was prepared. First pay up, then we'll talk, I stated seriously. The man, brimming with passion, instantly deflated, looking at me with a pitiful demeanor. Sweetheart, do you know this totally ruins the mood? I knew that, and I was doing it on purpose. If Mavis Andrew has no money, I'm just going to leave. He watched helplessly as I buttoned my shirt back up, his face a deep shade of red. When I left only the last 3 buttons undone, he grabbed my hand, then reached into his desk to pull out a card. This is all the spare cash I have. A friend lent me this. Just take it, but promise not to be mad. I know men become bad when they have money, but surely you won't leave me with nothing. I didn't quite get what he was rambling about. Taking the card, I ruthlessly swiped it, finding just 75,000 in it. Still 5,000 short of the 80,000 needed for the surgery. I knew he was lying about being short on cash this morning. I felt so clever now. As I swiped the card, Mavis Andrew confirmed the door was locked and the curtains drawn. By the time he stood before me again, his breathing had quickened. Despite being nearly 30 and a ruthless player in business, he now resembled a mere boy. Sweetheart, is this really okay? Without a second thought, I replied, aren't I just your plaything? The office fell deadly silent. After a long pause, his expression darkened, as if shadows could pour from his face, his voice icy and chilling. Darling, be a good girl and tell me, who said that to you? Hasn't it always been like this? I murmured. He was usually gentle, with those beautiful peach blossom eyes adding to his charm, but now, his sudden cold demeanor scared me a bit. If you give me money, I'll repay you. Isn't that fair? I added quickly. His furrowed brow showed he finally grasped something. Are you short on cash? I nodded. Wasn't it obvious? How much? Just tell me. 5,000. 50 million. Give me a few hours, he said, swiftly dialing a number. I hurriedly caught his arm. I meant 5,000. Upon hearing the reduced amount, his expression grew more serious. Darling, tell me honestly, is it your father's company that's in trouble? I shook my head. My family's just average. We don't run any companies. Mavis Andrew didn't seem to buy it, and was about to press further, dismissing me back to my spot while he frantically made phone calls in the office. I watched the 75,000 balance, hesitating. Should I just return it? But last night was quite eventful. I gingerly rubbed my sore waist, and suddenly the money felt a bit more justified. But that wasn't the right path in reality. What I really needed was to earn more. Looking at the fluctuations in the stock market, I felt an unexpected urge. That evening, aboard a luxurious cruise ship, I accompanied Mavis Andrew to a banquet, with dazzling lights, handsome men, beautiful women, pulsating music, and the deep blue ocean. The atmosphere brimmed with flirtation, intoxicating everyone around. As we got out of the car, Mavis Andrew noticed I hadn't been very happy these past few days, and urged me to enjoy myself. At first, I couldn't care less. Everyone greeted Mavis Andrew as he entered, showing he was clearly a regular in such places. It was evident he wanted to play. 2 hours later, I was getting more and more into the groove, dancing in the club with a male model, who was bare-chested. Mavis Andrew sat alone in the corner, watching me with a forlorn expression. My phone buzzed in my pocket, forcing me to pause. A man's cold voice came through the receiver. If you dare to let him wrap his arms around your waist, believe me, I'll have someone chop off his hands. Seeing the male model extend his arm, I immediately ran back to Mavis Andrew. Don't be so fierce. I downed the drink in front of him in one gulp, leaning weakly against him, feeling the effects of the alcohol. In just one day, I realized that I seemed to be increasingly dependent on this charming CEO. Although he would never marry a mere secretary like me, it felt like I was falling. I was a bit downcast, but Mavis Andrew misread my mood. Is it so painful for you to come back and keep me company? He tilted his head to look at me, his eyes inscrutable. In the next instant, he pulled me onto his lap, a strong hand gripping the back of my head, his scorching lips crashing onto mine. The kiss bore a hint of punishment. He was domineering and rough, and only released me when I could hardly breathe. Juliet Rallying. Remember your place. Mavis Andrews' clear voice carried a hint of coaxing. Thinking back to what had happened that afternoon, he added, "You are my wife." I felt a bit hazy and drowsily agreed, leaning against Mavis Andrew until I slowly fell asleep. But just before completely passing out, I thought I heard the man's anxious voice calling out. Mavis Andrew thought Juliet Rallian was just tired, until he noticed blood trickling from her ear, which made him panic. The cruise ship was immediately ordered to dock, and his best friend Merlin Brooke called a doctor for him. "Mavis Andrew, you don't need to worry. It's just the after effects of the car accident. She needs to rest for a while and avoid strenuous activities." Car accident. He uttered these words in disbelief, and then shot a knife-like glare at the driver. The driver, realizing the cover-up was futile, had to confess everything. It turned out that Juliet Rallian had been in a serious car accident a week ago, but he hadn't been informed at the time since he was on a business trip abroad, fearing it would affect his work. In his heart, she was the most important. Nothing could compare to her. When they had gotten their marriage license, hadn't she ever believed him? Mavis Andrew felt a nameless emotion boiling in his heart, surging to his throat, choking him into silence. I woke up again, my surroundings revealing a hospital room. Mavis Andrew sat by my side, his face haggard. Seeing me wake up, he hurriedly stood to check on me. "Wife, do you feel any discomfort? Should I call a doctor?" I looked at him with a faint smile. "Are you so worried because you're afraid I'd ruin my face, and no longer look like your white moonlight?" As soon as I finished speaking, he dashed out of the hospital room, feeling a bit hungry. I sat up and gulped down the seafood porridge beside me. By the time the thermos was empty, Mavis Andrew returned, looking as pale as a ghost. I didn't know what the doctor had said to him. "Wife, first of all, your family is much wealthier than mine. You definitely aren't with me for my money. Secondly, we've known each other since childhood, and not a single mosquito around me is male. Who are you standing in for?" I thought for a moment, scratching my head. Then I must be standing in for some man. Mavis Andrew immediately got angry. "Juliet Rallian, come here, and I promise I won't strangle you." The doctor, just entering, quickly intervened. "Mavis Andrew, stop it. Didn't I say that Mrs. Juliet Rallian isn't quite in her right mind, and you should go easy on her?" Back home from the hospital, the first thing Mavis Andrew did was rush upstairs to retrieve the marriage certificate from the safe. "Look, this is you, this is me, this is our marriage certificate. If I didn't like you, why would I marry you?" He looked at me sincerely. I smirked. "Of course, it's to protect your white moonlight, and help me handle your family's marriage pressure." "What about the agreement we signed?" "What agreement?" "The agreement that we divorce after 3 years. Mavis Andrew stared at me, speechless from anger. His face turned beet red as he finally managed to squeak out, "If you mention divorce again, I won't give your ICU brother any more money." I looked at him in disbelief. He realized too late that he had blurted something awkwardly. "I didn't mean it. Your brother is doing fine." I nodded. "I just meant that for a big CEO like you, you wouldn't just sleep with me for 3 years. Have you paid for the next phase of his medical expenses?" Mavis Andrew, he hadn't expected these two storylines to be so intertwined. Rubbing his temples, he looked troubled. Just then, my phone rang suddenly. It was my parents. Mavis Andrew looked at the screen and nervously hung up. Then, on Weshit, my mom sent a dozen profiles of young and talented men, along with a voice message urging me to go on a blind date. "The family is in such trouble. Why should I bother with blind dates? These guys would definitely run as soon as they hear about our situation." I complained aloud, glancing at Mavis Andrew instinctively. He watched me with dimmed eyes, hiding the rising tide in his heart. "We're in a covert marriage." I pushed down the pang of bitterness and feigned nonchalance, smiling. "I get it. You're worried your white moonlight would be sad. But Mavis Andrew, I have a loose tongue. You'd better use money to keep me quiet." Mavis Andrew's face remained stony, as if he was used to this, expressions flat as he dialed a number. 10 minutes later, he transferred me 200,000. "I sold the Linjiang villa. Once your memory comes back, don't blame me for selling it at a low price. Honestly, dear wife, you have hidden the little money stash so well that I'm afraid we might run out of money for food at this rate." I shot him a glance. "What are you babbling about? Mavis Andrew gritted his teeth at me. I'm saying, woman, if you take my money, you have to satisfy my needs. I nodded. Now this sounds like your line. Suddenly, both of us fell silent, as if time had stopped for a few seconds. Warm light flickered in Mavis Andrews' amber eyes. He seemed to think of something and suddenly chuckled softly. I felt a bit confused, but as I looked at the balance, my thoughts started to race. Money needs to flow. It only grows that way. As the lights came on, Mavis Andrew returned with a garment bag, not even taking off his suit jacket before hiding the thing in the bedroom. It looked like a mystery. Could it be for his white moonlight? Well, he didn't need to hide it from me. Am I so lacking in taste that I'd want to steal a dress? Suppressing the turbulence within myself, I began focusing on the news. The sound of water running in the bathroom unexpectedly struck a chord. I had to admit, this guy was exactly my type, hitting all the aesthetic points for me. He emerged from the bathroom, wearing a bathrobe that revealed well-defined muscles. I took a glance and quickly looked away, suppressing my heartbeat. Wife, come here for a second. Hey. About your brother's medical expenses. I immediately got up and followed him into the bedroom. Perhaps due to the steam, his face seemed slightly flushed. His honey-colored, watery peach blossom eyes looked at me, signaling me to open the garment bag. As I pulled out the contents, I was taken aback. A familiar blue and white school uniform. In the morning, Mavis Andrew was already dressed sharply, occasionally glancing at me. He smirked like a cat that had snatched a fish. A real piece of art. I stretched and almost felt like pouncing on him to bite a few times. In the next moment, he came over and ruffled my hair. You didn't cooperate with my mother on the blind dates, and she's unhappy, so I have to take you back to the old mansion for dinner tonight. I turned my head to bite his palm, only to receive another kiss. I didn't know why this big spender wanted to meet my parents, but as a little canary, I had no authority to refuse. That evening, amidst the Sioux-style gardens hidden in the villa area, Mavis Andrew held my hand. Wife, don't you think something feels off? If your family was truly poor, how could they afford to live in such a place? I scrutinized the yard and shook my head. This looks like several village bungalows were turned into one. Just a few ditches dug. It couldn't have cost much. As a daughter, I couldn't return empty-handed, so I picked a wildflower to gift to my parents. Mavis Andrew watched Juliet Rallying, feeling a bad premonition. A villa worth an average of $200,000 a square meter was described by his wife as a small bungalow. An exquisitely designed curved pool by a top landscape architect was declared as ditches. Even the wildflowers she picked seemed to be Juliet roses, which his mother had carefully nurtured for years and were worth $5 million each outside. Hopefully, everything would go smoothly tonight. Perhaps if the in-laws saw their daughter had turned forgetful, they would willingly marry her off to him. Yes, he prayed for her to be even a bit more forgetful. Mavis Andrew, what have you been busy with lately? Facing my father, the normally commanding Mavis Andrew took a low stance. This year, the Andrew family is collaborating with universities, focusing on bioengineering and medical devices, with future expansion plans in smart homes and elderly care. Additionally, the Andrew family's film industry has 4 productions planned, starring actors that Juliet Rallying likes. We've also acquired the private restaurant on Chang'an Street that she enjoys, officially transferring next month. Seeing Mavis Andrew answer while serving me food, my parents nodded in satisfaction. Mavis Andrew, what's your view on marriage? On the 13th of next month, the Andrew family will officially go public, and I'm willing to offer 25% of the Andrew family shares as a bride price. His words made me gasp. Her brother Gene Thackeray isn't ambitious, and insists on mingling in the entertainment industry, so the entire Rallying family is now for Juliet Rallying's future. Are you trying to take advantage of that? My father asked sternly. I am open to signing a prenuptial agreement. How we operate doesn't matter to me. During holidays, I'll only come to visit you, ensuring Juliet Rallying won't suffer from her in-laws' bullying. As he spoke, Mavis Andrew suddenly looked at me tenderly, holding my hand. I truly only care about Juliet Rallying as a person. Our eyes met, and my heart skipped a beat. Yet a voice in my head warned, don't trust him, don't trust him. Looking at my mom's gaze on Mavis Andrew, it was already the look of a mother-in-law approving of her son-in-law. If this continued, it would be a disaster. So, I set my chopsticks down. He's not only interested in me, his white moonlight is abroad, and I'm just a stand-in. Mom, Dad, please don't meddle. There's no future between us. Just think of him as my boss. Our family isn't worthy of. Before I could finish my sentence, Mavis Andrew had tightly grabbed me. Please, ancestor, don't say another word. If you do, I'll have to kneel outside the villa. Seeing my dad ready to lift his cane to chase him away, Mavis Andrew knelt down. I'm still in shock when my dad has already swung a stick at Mavis Andrew's back. I told you, this kid had the guts to flirt with my daughter in school. What good could come from that? I didn't even mention how your family values are questionable, with so many kids and a bastard like you as the heir. Now you dare to use my daughter as a substitute. Seeing my dad about to hit again, I quickly stepped in front of Mavis Andrew. Dad, what about my brother's hospital fees if you keep this up? My parents were completely stunned. Mavis Andrew spoke up, looking ashamed. Uncle, Aunt, I'm sorry. It's my fault for not taking good care of Juliet Ralaine. She had a car accident a few days ago and is a bit confused. You checked into my background during school, and you can do it again now. I've never behaved inappropriately. After hearing his words, my dad quickly turned his gaze to me, instructing others to investigate. 10 minutes later, as I listened to the report, my mom helped Mavis Andrew up, looking a bit guilty. We misunderstood you. Sorry for the trouble you've had during this time. Mavis Andrew shook his head. It's not a bother. It's what I should do. A gut feeling told me that Mavis Andrew was cunning. He was probably feeling more pleased inside than he was putting on. Every word he had said and every act he had done since walking in, including me possibly saying something to him when he knelt, were all part of his plan. For some reason, I felt a twinge of irritation. Why was he scheming against me? A mere substitute. My parents were completely enamored. They believed Mavis Andrew was the perfect son-in-law they had wanted, encouraging me to get along with him, and to abandon my temper. What kind of temper could I have being a substitute? What to do, how to do it, what to wear or not wear? Was it not all up to Mavis Andrew? I curled my lip, bored as I scrolled through my phone. A notification popped up about a class reunion. Shortly thereafter, my friend Erica Clemens privately messaged me. Erica Clemens, your Mavis Andrews' first love, Gail Connie, is back. She'll be at the reunion too. Are you going? Juliet Ralaine, sure. How could I miss such an exciting showdown between the first love and the substitute? On the weekend, at the Royal Club, I hopped into a cab wearing a white t-shirt and jeans and went. Just as I got out of the cab, I heard a confident woman say, "Yes, that's right. I'm Mavis Andrews' wife from the Andrew Group. Don't tell anyone. We're in a secret marriage." I followed her into the private room, and witnessed her say this to no fewer than 20 people. The real secret wife. Looking at Gail Connie, all dressed up, it was hard to connect her with the refined and gentle Mavis Andrew. My urge to scoff was overwhelming as I pulled out my phone to message Mavis Andrew. Juliet Ralaine, Mavis Andrew. No wonder you wear glasses. Turns out your eyesight isn't great. Mavis Andrew. Mavis Andrew, honey, did you forget to take the medicine I prepared for you this morning? Is this really the two big school beauties from back then? The contrast is striking. Everyone looked at me with disdain, yet their eyes sparkled at Gail Connie. Gail Connie, is that the latest Balenciaga bag? I don't think it's even out here yet. Oh. It's nothing. Mavis Andrew brought it back for me when he was on a business trip. I told him not to, but he insisted on gifting it to me. Gail Connie pouted playfully, prompting some of the girls around her to tease her. When you went abroad, Mavis Andrew didn't even sit for the college entrance exam. He went straight after you. And now, just like that, you two are married. He still dotes on you so much. Gail Connie smiled brightly. I just love that he's so thoughtful. Mavis Andrew is indeed thoughtful. Outsiders see Mavis Andrew as the busy CEO of a soon-to-be publicly listed company, undoubtedly lacking the time to bother with small matters. But I heard from the butler that Mavis Andrew personally chooses everything in the house, including my seasonal clothes. I thought it was due to his obsessive-compulsive nature, but it turns out it was because the goddess likes it. My heart felt a gentle sting. Some place that once felt so comfortable now made me feel a bit nauseous. I wanted to move out immediately. Gail Connie, How did such a big shot like Mavis Andrew propose to you? Please tell us. We're all super curious. Several women crowded around Gail Connie, eager to listen. In my mind, fragmented memories surfaced. Winter, Copenhagen. At the port, the church bells ringing under the setting sun. Whispers of lovers. Everything felt like a fairy tale. Cunning like a fox, Mavis Andrew had two plans ready. A successful proposal with a diamond ring and a key. A failed proposal that would involve jumping into the Baltic Sea with me. I got proposed to in Denmark because I love fairy tales. I told him when I was 17 that if he ever proposes, it must be there, that way, I'd say yes. Wow, Tilda, so romantic. Was this what Gail Connie wanted all along? I suppressed the pain pounding in my chest, feeling cold as if submerged in icy water, but my mind felt clearer than ever. Mavis Andrew really went abroad all those years ago for Gail Connie. I didn't understand why I, as a substitute, was entangled in these facts. I guessed it was because I had unwittingly developed real feelings for Mavis Andrew. Since 3 years had passed, his first love returned, and it was time for me to step aside. At the class reunion, Mavis Andrew was eager to make an appearance. He wanted to avoid those junior high boys who used to harbor crushes on his wife from bothering her again. He wondered if she wore her wedding ring today. During a meeting, he zoned out several times. As soon as it ended, he drove straight to the venue. By the time he arrived, a heavy rain had started, and a crowd was waiting for a ride at the entrance. He quickly grabbed an umbrella and got out of the car to meet his wife, wanting to assert his ownership, but Juliette Ralleine brushed right past him, walking toward the road, drenched in the rain. He quickly turned around to catch up. Juliette Ralleine preferred to soak in the rain than face him again, and coldly stated, "Let's get a divorce, Mavis Andrew." In that instant, the sky seemed to fall for Mavis Andrew. Juliette Ralleine took a cab and left. Before she left, she rolled down the window and pointed, "Your first love is over there. Don't come looking for me." Mavis Andrew, confused about what had just happened, had no choice but to drive after her. Those outside the club were excited to see the flashy luxury car, and then noticed the man huddled under an umbrella by the roadside. "Gail Connie, isn't that your husband?" Gail Connie froze, following Evrion's gazes to see none other than the recurring cover star of financial magazines, Mavis Andrew, CEO of the Andrew Group. This was a big opportunity. Gail Connie rushed over. People thought the couple would sweetly return home, but to Evrion's surprise, after just a few words, the man drove off alone. As the car sped away, the water splashed all over Gail Connie. When he returned, Gail Connie was still wearing a smile. "My husband said I could hang out with you all a bit longer, since we're old classmates and it's been a while." Everyone nodded, although the smile felt a bit stiff and awkward. At the villa, when Mavis Andrew arrived half an hour later, I was in the shower. I thought he was catching up with an old flame and wouldn't return tonight. Dressed in my pajamas, I emerged to find him in the study, rubbing his temples. Under the dim light, he looked a bit fatigued. Perhaps there was too much on his plate before the company's IPO. "Juliette Ralleine, can we not argue? I'm really tired these days," I murmured a response, stepping into the study and pulling out a document from the bottom shelf of the bookcase. He was surprised by my obedience and laughed, relaxing a bit. "Once this busy period is over, I placed the document in front of him, and he fell silent. As he looked at the words, "divorce agreement," a storm brewed in his eyes. After a long pause, he managed a forced smile. "Have you run out of money to help your brother?" "Juliette Ralleine, it's okay if you're sick. I don't hold it against you." He stood up, intending to pull me into an embrace, but I took a step back. "I made money trading stocks. Also, this agreement is from 3 months ago." 3 months ago. I hadn't even had the accident yet. His smile vanished entirely. The Mavis Andrew in my memories rarely got angry, but now he was genuinely furious, his demeanor dark and somewhat frightening. In an instant, he swept me up and carried me back to the bedroom. I struggled desperately, even slapping him, but he didn't let go. He tore off his tie and bound my hands to the headboard. A fervent kiss crashed upon me like a tempest. All I could do was bite his tongue. The taste of blood filled my mouth. "Why? Unless you give me a reason I can accept, you won't be sleeping tonight." "Tomorrow night, or any night after that. His eyes were cold and fierce, filled with a rage that seemed ready to consume me. Thinking about his strength made my legs weak. My voice softened. What reason would you accept? Any reason won't do. Great. It was clear he wanted to torment me. I lay limp, not expecting this guy to even take interest. I quickly shrank back. Your first love is back. You should go find her, not your substitute. Is me bringing up the divorce making you lose face? How about we just say you proposed and we can pretend it was a good fit? Finally cornered. My nose stung, and my voice had a crying edge. Mavis Andrew, don't touch me. He really stopped. Mavis Andrew said nothing, just stared at me, his eyes red in the dim light, looking somewhat vulnerable. Maybe he truly loved me. A pang of remorse bubbled inside me. Have you ever been with her? What? Gail Connie. No, I've really only been with you. If I'm lying, let me become a eunuch. Well, that's pretty good. Then you can be my best friend, Juliet Ralleine. I looked at Mavis Andrew, who had dark circles under his eyes, feeling both angry and aggrieved as he stared at me, suppressing the sudden thought of immediate divorce. The money was his, and with the IPO just around the corner, negative public sentiment wouldn't do. Since he didn't love me, I could just focus on guarding my own heart. Mavis Andrew loosened his tie and held me, making me feel drowsy. Honey, when you wake up tomorrow, will you still love me? I never loved you to begin with. In an instant, Mavis Andrew turned to me, his eyes glistening with moisture. It was as if I didn't say something to salvage the moment, he would really cry. I quickly cuddled him, playing along. Tonight we'll pretend to love each other. It's getting late. We should sleep. A few minutes later, Mavis Andrew, I meant love, not sleep. Deny it all you want. Tonight, my wife will only say things that hurt me. I'll have to compensate for that myself. Mavis Andrew had never felt secure since childhood. His parents taught him to do whatever it took to get ahead. When everything he desired turned into reality, fear left him. But once he met Juliet Ralleine, everything reverted back to square one. He walked on eggshells, carefully moving from being behind her to standing beside her. No one knew how much effort he had expended. Initially, he thought the only barrier between them was their family backgrounds, not realizing there was much more. Mavis Andrew repeatedly felt Juliet Ralleine's presence. He was acutely aware of his pathological possessiveness. If she wished to be with him, they would be a loving couple. If not, he would rather destroy himself than let her go. His fate had already been surrendered to her since the first time little Juliet Ralleine stood up for him. As dawn broke, Juliet Ralleine woke up in a chaotic room. A soiled tie, torn pajamas, and a broken umbrella. Ouch! Is this the fighting power of a mafia boss? She couldn't believe that someone who looked so refined could turn out to be a complete beast. Can't fight back? Time to run. She couldn't remember how she ended up there. Most likely, it was due to Mavis Andrew's influence. She quickly got up, rummaging for clothes and searching for something valuable to exchange for money. Just then, the man in bed woke up. He reached out as if to hug her but immediately sat up when he realized she was gone. Wife, why are you acting so sneakily? I'm not. Seeing her smile innocently made Mavis Andrew feel something was off. I shredded yesterday's divorce agreement. Don't even think about it. I didn't. She blinked her eyes, looking innocent. With lingering doubts, he stepped outside. As soon as the car pulled out of the courtyard, she immediately started scavenging for valuables as if she were a bandit entering a village. A variety of clothes and jewelry filled 2 large boxes. Finally, she touched her stomach. Baby, mommy isn't greedy. I'm just collecting a bit of your child support in advance. Then, dragging her 2 huge suitcases, she headed out of sight. Mavis Andrew watched the surveillance footage, his eyes darkening. He looked toward the doctor, waiting for an explanation. The doctor cleared his throat and said, "This might be a new script. The young wife running with a baby. So, according to the plot, you can choose to catch her and punish her, or meet at the airport in 5 years." As soon as he finished speaking, Mavis Andrew slammed the door and left. He wore 2 pairs of sunglasses, worth $8,000 each, one on his eyes, and one on his head. He wrapped 5 silk scarves worth $30,000 around his neck. His entire appearance was disguised to the point that even his own mother wouldn't recognize him. As a ruler of the underworld, Mavis Andrew was ruthless and incredibly powerful. Since she wanted to run away, he needed to prepare thoroughly. Until everything passed through security, she felt suspicious. Why was it going so smoothly? Just as that thought crossed her mind, she was grabbed by a panting man. "Wife, where are you going?" Mavis Andrew's black suit was tight, his shirt stained with sweat. Gail Connie hesitated, shifting her gaze to look behind him. There were no little brothers or bodyguards. "Did you seal off the airport?" "Wife, this is a society governed by law. I haven't reached that level yet." Mavis Andrew rubbed his forehead. "Isn't that what mafia bosses do? Why isn't it like what the books say?" "Wife, what are you mumbling about?" Seeing her wear a strange outfit, he reached out to untie her scarf. "What are you wearing?" His gaze held a mix of grief and reluctance, as if looking at a pitiful and foolish wife. Inside, she felt a surge of anger. Since the airport wasn't under his control, a light bulb went off in her head. She slapped his hand away and raised her voice. "Sir, don't think about grabbing me and imprisoning me to have your children. I was deceived and sold to you. But you, looking so refined and educated, how could you engage in such disgusting acts? I'm all alone without parents or anyone to back me. Good people, judge for yourselves. I just want freedom. Is that wrong?" Mavis Andrew was dumbfounded, his body stiffening. He realized his wife had changed dramatically after her memory loss, but he never expected her to transform from a cold, elegant girl into a drama queen. In his peripheral vision, he noticed people pointing and taking out their phones to record them. For the sake of the Andrew family stock market, and for his wife to face the public with dignity once she regained her memory, Mavis Andrew closed his eyes. Then, seemingly having made up his mind, he leaned close to Juliet Ralline's ear and coldly whispered, "If you dare leave today, I'll have your brother's body lying on the streets of City A tomorrow." Pulling his quail-like wife quickly out of the airport, Mavis Andrew felt somewhat confused. Clearly, it was his wife who had lost her memory. Yet why did it feel like he was going crazy? Mavis Andrew truly was a cold and ruthless man, she thought to herself. Why did he come alone to chase after her? It turned out her brother's life was in his hands. Arriving back at the villa, she lethargically put her things away. Throughout, Mavis Andrew kept staring at her, eventually seeming to make a decision. By afternoon, over 20 bodyguards clad in black appeared outside the villa. She knew they must all be Mavis Andrew's minions. He even called a private doctor to check on her. She worried he might discover her pregnancy. After all, it was rumored that he only allowed his first love, Gail Connie, to carry his child. After examining her, the doctor said nothing and prescribed a lot of medication. She knew it must be contraceptives. "Can I not take them?" She looked at Mavis Andrew, resisting, but didn't dare defy him outright. "No, don't make me take action." He pulled out the aura of a big boss, holding a handful of pills in one hand and a few pink candies in the other. With tear-filled eyes, she gazed at him, eventually decisively swallowing the pills without looking at the candies. Diving headfirst into the blanket, she knew Mavis Andrew had never liked her. He didn't want her to have his child. She hated how her emotions wavered because of him. She didn't know, when the man left, she drowsily drifted off to sleep, and when she woke up again, it was to the sunset outside the glass window. It was quiet and lonely, and a tremendous feeling of abandonment washed over her. She seemed to have dreamt of a younger Mavis Andrew, under huge cotton candy-like clouds, on an empty rooftop with the scent of summer grass in the air. A teen dressed in blue and white school uniform held his breath, cautiously approaching the me that seemed to be asleep. His heart raced like the strawberry soda bombs she loved to drink. In the end, there was a soft stolen kiss. After that day, she had never been as certain as she was then about his feelings for her. She curled up under the blanket, not even going down for dinner. Not until stars began twinkling in the sky did Mavis Andrew return. Slightly drunk, he shed his outer coat and embraced her from behind, repetitively calling her wife. She thought this was an opportunity and turned to face him. "Mavis Andrew, please stop giving me medication. I want to keep this child." Heh. After all, it was a little life. She truly didn't want to give him up. Biting her lip, she continued, "I know you don't want this child. I'll make sure the child doesn't recognize you." "You're saying the child won't recognize me?" She even heard the grinding of his teeth. his fierce gaze seeming to want to bite her throat. She shivered and directly buried herself in his embrace, no longer daring to look at him. For quite a while, she heard him let out a cool, mocking laugh. Wife, if you want to drive me crazy, just say it outright. No need to beat around the bush. I'm not. Her face buried in his chest, she mumbled softly. He kissed the top of her head, holding her closer, his tone filled with frustration. Wife, when will you regain your memory? She didn't know what he was talking about, but she could sense that perhaps due to the alcohol, his body felt a bit warm, and his hands began to roam restlessly. That'll crush the baby. She firmly pushed his hands away. Wife, you seem to have gained a bit of weight. Let me check. Don't. I heard that the right kind of comfort is good for the baby. Really? The next morning, she lay in bed for half an hour, feeling lifeless. Secretary, stand in, running away with the baby, regaining my memory. I just wanted to quiet down and leave this world. Then she thought of all his deceitful behaviors for his own gain, and her face flushed with shame, kicking him off the bed in anger. The man, caught off guard, tumbled out of bed, sitting up drowsily. Wife, you moved so much. Aren't you worried about the baby? She glared at him icily. Mavis Andrew was stimulated by this familiar feeling and finally reacted, quickly climbing back onto the bed, emotionally overwhelmed. He hugged her tightly, like a large accessory. Wife, you finally regained your memory. You have no idea how anxious I've been these past days, fearing that my massive wife might just disappear in the blink of an eye. After 3 years of a secret marriage, they were practically old married couples. She had grown accustomed to his composed and elegant demeanor in public and found it hard to adjust to this enthusiastic version of Mavis Andrew. But thinking back on what had happened during this time, she felt silly, foolish, and vivacious. She couldn't really blame him. Sensing her coldness, Mavis Andrew's spirits sank. He recalled the accident he had hidden from her and the divorce agreement he had prepared long ago. Why didn't you tell me about the accident? His beautiful eyes held a hint of obsession, resembling a deep pool. To you, your career matters more. It doesn't matter if you're away for 3 months since you have beautiful female subordinates at the company and white moonlight overseas. What does my small injury matter to you? As soon as the words left her mouth, she felt a pang of regret. Was this compliant wife persona really her character? She had withheld her feelings because she didn't want to make things awkward with Mavis Andrew. Having been proud all her life, she had weathered the highs and lows of the stock market without faltering. How embarrassing it was to be sobbing and whining just for a man. She had mentally prepared for some indifferent explanations from him, but to her surprise, he apologized first. Wife, it's all my fault. This past year, I admit I focused more on my career. It's due to my pride. I was afraid your parents wouldn't approve of me. I wanted to achieve something quickly to have an open and proper wedding, but I may have neglected your feelings. I'm truly sorry. In my parents' eyes, no one is worthy of me, she replied quietly. As for the white moonlight, he hesitated. I could feel my ears perk up quietly. Wife, I'm not afraid of you calling me a pervert. My one and only white moonlight has always been you. You were the first person I dreamed about in high school, and ever since, I've been looking for opportunities to steal a kiss from you. After going abroad, I kept stalking all your social media accounts, and when I returned home, I thought every day about how to bring you back with me. Wife, I've always been your dog. Don't leave me. His words made my face flush, but I tried to remain calm. I'll verify what you said, but to take advantage of my amnesia to persuade me to wear a school uniform and say it's good for the baby, that still deserves punishment. Chapter 20, Side Story. Juliette Ralleine. That kid's family is just a nouveau rich trying to curry favor with you, clearly wanting to leverage your family's resources. As long as it's convenient for me, what does it matter? Juliette Ralleine replied carelessly, waving her hand toward the door. The boy who had been standing outside quickly walked in. He had heard everything, yet he remained composed. My fountain pen is out of ink. I also need a strawberry milk tea that's mostly ice and lightly sweetened. And please borrow me a copy of Principles of Economics from the library. The boy nodded. Half an hour later, Juliette Ralleine's friends fell silent. 5 fountain pens worth over 1,000 each, along with ink, and 2 thick copies of Principles of Economics, one in Chinese and one in English, were neatly arranged on Juliette Rallayne's desk. Only the cup of strawberry milk tea made Juliette Rallayne frown. Why is it hot? The boy remained silent. That night, she got her period. How could he know about such personal matters? What a schemer! The girl's face was flushed with anger, but an unusual feeling began to spread within her. Mavis Andrew had indeed used cunning on Juliette Rallayne from the start. When his parents sought connections to get him into this elite school in the capital, he understood their intentions. The students here were either rich or powerful. Even what seemed like a wealthy family in City S was insignificant, compared to those who had been affluent for generations. The school was like a small society, and as someone at the bottom, he naturally became one of the protected ones. In the first week, he was beaten so badly that there was no uninjured spot on his body. However, he did gain some insight into a few individuals at the top of the social pyramid. The most beautiful and seemingly untouchable of them was named Juliette Rallayne. He had seen her before. She likely forgot. When she was 7 and visiting City S with her grandfather, she had given a little beggar a beautifully illustrated storybook. While others handed out food, she presented a hardcover fairy tale book. That was during Mavis Andrews' first attempt to run away from home. With too many siblings, no one noticed him. He gazed at the beautiful storybook and ultimately chose to return home. He just couldn't bear the thought of such a pristine, lovely object being part of his wandering life. Later, his book was torn apart by his brother, and he, the weakest, became a person of deep cunning, holding grudges. On the day he transferred to this school, he recognized her at first glance. During his self-introduction on stage, the beautiful girl stared at his face for 5 seconds. Later, when he was being bullied, he intentionally designed it so she could see. She stopped the assailants, and he took the opportunity to repay her kindness, using all his charm to win her over. For 2 full years, he believed no one understood Juliette Rallayne better than he did. Perhaps, as a devoted admirer, Juliette Rallayne had seen enough to remain indifferent towards him. Mavis Andrew considered himself a patient hunter. Over the 2 years, he had slowly infiltrated various aspects of her life, and then he engineered another episode of being bullied. A few boys pinned him to the ground, and a wealthy one kicked him on the shoulder, cursing that he was just Juliette Rallayne's dog. He stayed silent, sweat beading from the pain in his forehead. He clenched his fists, repeatedly telling himself to endure. Knowing Juliette Rallayne would walk by soon, he wanted her to feel sorry for him. Is Juliette Rallayne tearing up my love letter? Just for a guy like you? Seriously, does she think I'm dependent on her? And she's from the Rallayne family. Anyone who would settle for someone like you is probably already a used item. What's with the pretense? In that moment, it felt like a string broke in Mavis Andrews' mind. He struggled violently and swung his fists at the wealthy boy. Even though he was outnumbered, he kept his sights on the one who had just insulted him, until Juliette Rallayne called out to him. The rich kid was already bloodied from the beating. He had never been an impulsive person, but it was only after everything settled that he began to think about what to do next. The boy's family could easily ruin his own parents financially with just a snap of their fingers. His grandfather, with his deep connections, might ensure that he spent his life behind bars, but he had no regrets. He saw the girl he had been admiring for 2 years gently taking out a handkerchief to wipe the blood from his hands. Does it hurt? For the first time, he straightforwardly let himself be vulnerable, daring to make eye contact with her. He felt something stir in his heart. He insulted you. Yeah, I heard. A week later, the wealthy boy, all bandaged up, awkwardly apologized to Mavis Andrew. The young Mavis Andrew didn't care about this. He successfully positioned himself beside the heiress he admired, and then he fell completely. On the rooftop, in a stolen kiss, the girl suddenly opened her eyes, and he had nowhere to run. Blushing as he confessed, they officially confirmed their relationship. Sadly, it wasn't long before their affair was discovered by the Rallayne family. The Rallayne family believed the Andrews held improper values, and pressured him to leave the country. They also sponsored a struggling student, Gail Connie, demanding that Gail present herself as his first love. Mavis Andrew knew he was unworthy of Juliette Rallayne. Even while still in school, Juliette Ralliine multiplied her New Year's gift of 50,000 into 2 billion through stock trading. She earned more than his parents had in decades of business. His close friend, Merlin Brooke, also advised him that treating a person like an object doesn't lead to a lasting relationship. It was a harsh truth, and so, he didn't rush back home, focusing solely on his career, until he heard that the Ralliine family was arranging blind dates for their university graduate daughter. He hurriedly bought a plane ticket overnight. Arriving at the Ralliine house, he learned that the young lady had gone out to celebrate a birthday with her blind date. He inquired around. Finally, he caught her at a bar. She looked even prettier after 4 years apart. Her seaweed-like chestnut hair flowed carelessly over her shoulders, and her porcelain skin glowed under the lights. The cool school beauty had transformed into an elite socialite, exuding captivating beauty with every gesture. However, her gaze towards him had turned cold again, just like at the beginning. Is Mavis Andrew also here for a blind date? Yeah, here's my asset verification and medical report. Single. Yes. Then let's drink. Juliette Ralliine handed him a bottle of vodka. In the VIP booth, separated from the noise outside, Juliette Ralliine leaned against Mavis Andrew, reminiscing. That night, it seems like we drank quite a lot. Mavis Andrew chuckled shyly. Because I wanted to get you drunk and take advantage. Juliette Ralliine wasn't angry, because at that time she had thought the same. Clearing her throat, Juliette Ralliine picked up a drink from the table and handed it to Mavis Andrew. Don't change the subject. Remember your punishment. Mavis Andrew, wearing a white shirt, felt his face flush, mechanically responding, "A sister, I can't drink anymore. Be good. Finish this bottle, and the rest is yours." As she spoke, Juliette Ralliine stuffed a wad of cash into the man's shirt, making his already firm muscles look even more imposing. His ears burning, the man still forced himself to play along. "Okay, I'll drink." "Sister, don't abandon me. Not an option. You finish drinking, and I'm going home. My husband is still waiting for me. You need to take good care of yourself. Don't lose your virtue, otherwise, I won't reach out to you next time." Juliette Ralliine was getting into the role, and didn't notice her husband's expression growing increasingly dark. When she didn't receive a response, she finally realized. "What's wrong? Wife, I've noticed you seem quite experienced. Have you said the same thing to a few other guys?" Juliette Ralliine could only feign ignorance. "What are you talking about, husband? I don't understand at all." The man stood up and swept Juliette Ralliine into his arms. Coincidentally, I learned a few interrogation techniques yesterday.